our panel here, we have several panelists that you have already seen and or heard. But right now we have two more joining us. One of them is Milan Schmiegitch, who is a visiting professor at Politecnico University of Torino, and who is also engaged there as a executive master's program in project management for business performance and innovation. He's a former board member of PMI Serbia chapter, and is currently involved in the PMI Global Accreditation Center as a academic visitor, and is also performing as a CEO at the Center for Project Management, where he is training new project managers in various project frameworks and methodologies. Another panel participant, last but not least, is a project management industry thought leader with nearly 45 years of experience. He is known for his thought leadership in the establishment of education and practitioner management standards. Since embarking on his project management journey back in 1966, he has implemented multiple enterprise project management processes and educated more than 40,000 project managers. Mr. Lambert was instrumental in creation of PMI project management professional credential, and he is with us here today. Okay. Yeah. Great to see you, everyone. So it's I'm currently at a loss for words to find a topic that could engage all of you, and it's simply a very difficult proposition. I would like to ask audience to assist me in this, to ask questions of what would they like to have this group discuss. I have few questions I would like to share with you until then, and we can have a let's say a round robin of who would like to speak first. My first question is, what would you share from your long experience on what would be some habits that have given you the greatest return of investment when you first started, and what could you share with our more junior colleagues for starting in this profession to basically, let's say, survive the first year? Let's have a couple of minutes each.
Well, let's have the oldest guy go first. That's me. One of the things I learned early on, and I've still practiced it to this day, is never stop asking questions. Don't take anything at face value. Ask questions until it hurts. In fact, I had a little motto once that used to say, keep asking questions until someone asks you to stop asking questions. Now you know you're getting close to the truth.
Thank you, Lee. I'll go next. This is a question actually I get very often, and especially from people who want to break into project management or maybe doing other careers and they see project management as something they want to go for. And actually in Berlin last week, we were giving a presentation there. We had lots of people doing masters, and I got a lot of questions. So they're all doing this big level course on project management, which is great, of course. But then they have this degree, but they don't have any practice. And they expect to walk into a job as a project manager, but they know that they can't. So they're kind of stuck because they don't have any experience. You get a job based on what you know. And you will never get a job just because you have a big certificate as a project manager. You get a job because you know project management, and you have experience in a certain field where people want it. They want domain experience. So the best way to get this is to lower your expectations a little bit and find a role called project coordinator or project support in the domain where you want to work. And that's like the back door in, and you get involved. And then I will follow Lee's example and just ask as many questions as possible and soak it all in. So thank you, Lee, for that help.
Yeah, I can build on to that a little. Another great way I've experienced is to volunteer for stuff. There's always extra work that needs to happen. And if you volunteer, we learn as we go. We ask lots of questions and listen lots as well. Read as much as you can, expand your toolbox. These are all, I think, great things to do early career and throughout our careers as we continue to learn.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So be a lifelong learner, which is I think what a lot of us are getting at here, but also be willing and interested in learning outside of your comfort zone. I think that there was an earlier question in the chat around, what if you don't have management and techie experience and it's unusual? It shouldn't be unusual. If PMs were lifelong learners, they at some point would have learned this techie stuff that they didn't know, or at least some of it. So, and vice versa, the techies should have learned some project management stuff they didn't know. So always be curious and always be willing to learn and question your own beliefs. I was listening into Sanjiv's talk, and I would argue he's been questioning some of the beliefs of the project management world for quite a while. And that's why he's been a thought leader in that space. So, because some of the things in the project management world are questionable. So question them. And I would say that of any other world, by the way, too. I'm just not picking on PMs here, but always question.
Well, I'm glad I went first.
Okay, maybe I'm last, right? So,
I'm waiting for you, Nadar.
Oh, sorry.
No, after you.
All right, thank you. So I was thinking, I wanted to say a few things, but others say that already. One thing that I can think about is that we really need to be questioning everything. That's absolutely necessary. But there's just one catch. When you're learning, you should be really open. So you may not like the thing that you're learning. You may end up hating it. I don't know. But throughout the process of learning, you should not think about those things. You should be absolutely open, try to learn it very well. And then at the end, you can decide whether or not you want to use it, you want to object it, or anything else. So a combination of questioning everything and being open to everything. Sanjiv, please, you.
Is there anybody else? Milan, did you go?
Wait for you, please, Sanjiv.
Okay, so so I have a couple of thoughts. One of them is very basic, and it comes from working with organizations and people where people show up late. There are meetings start 5 minutes late, or they start 10 minutes late, and they dismiss it and say, well, this is just the way we're doing things over here. If you're a project manager, or if you're an agilist, or an agilist and a project manager, there's a fundamental reason why we should be doing things that start on time and end on time. So I would say one of the biggest skills you can develop is to be early, right? And I think the Japanese thing is, if you're on time, you're late, right? So right from my grandfather, I think he said, well, it's better to be half an hour early than to be 5 minutes late. So if we apply this as a personal discipline and say, show up early, be open to learning, as all of these esteemed folks have said, that's a fundamental discipline that carries over, and we can lead by example, carries over not just from our personal example, but into the way we lead our projects, into the way we lead our teams. There's so much of agile, being an agilist, I'm just going to speak from that perspective, that has to do with things really operating in this cadence. It's all time-based. Well, if it's all time-based, we better start on time, we better end on time, and we have to figure out what the obstacles there are to that, right? The other thing that I've learned in my career, and this is by questioning the way that things have been done, is some years ago, I want to say quite some time ago, I encountered the work of, I believe he's Hungarian-American, a psychologist. His name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he talks about the psychology of flow, right? And this is flow, not the product flow we're talking about, but the mental zone that we can get in when we have the right conditions, as in we have focus, we have concentration, we have the right work. The work matches the challenge that we're looking for. We're talking about people working and focusing and liking work. So look into this concept of psychological flow. And then very closely aligned with that is the concept of energy management, right? Each one of us has to find that cycle, that optimal time that we are at our most productive, right? And so for me, that's early morning. If I can wake up in the early morning and I can have a good night's sleep and push all my meetings towards later in the day, if I can get even half an hour in the early morning, I can get into the psychological flow, and I can be hugely productive. So 2 things for project managers: pay attention to being on time, be early, and pay attention to the time that you are most productive so that you can get into the psychological flow.
Thanks. And Sanjiv, couple of thoughts that are following your ideas and reflections, which I found really valuable, are the most important things that I recognized in my career and the development of my professional communication with the customers and with the companies which are more and more looking for the agile transformation within, is actually the genuine interest for people and the organizations. On one side, with speaking about the interest for the people, I must say that almost 100 years ago, Carl Gustav Jung actually published a book about the human behavior, and actually enabled all of us to start learning from these kind of concepts. And I've seen a couple of really talented consultants which build upon his learning analysis and the ways people behave. And I found that myself that actually it was a booster for my professional development in the later stages, by developing some curricula, some consulting practices, and some ways of learning within the organization that I thought that were never being possible before. So my concept is actually we need to be looking forward to the changing organizations, to the organizations who are open-minded and who really strive for change makers, for the people who are actually called project managers, but who are project managers at all, the people who want to help teams, professionals, and organizations to change. And on the other side, we should be really eager to learn how people interact and to be fond of that community practice that in some of the regions, in some of the organizations, and some of the countries really work. And that's an enormous practice of difference out there that we can really use to step up and to help others to develop. So looking at that process, looking at that concept of developing of the professionals, individuals, teams, and organizations is actually a recipe for starters as a project managers. Because if you are eager on that, if that's inspiring you and it's not taking all your strength out of it when you're communicating, when you're asking questions, when you're putting the organization first and the community first, I think you are halfway done for the project management. That's about it.
Yep. Thank you, Milan. Can you please repeat the name of the book?
So it's Carl Gustav Jung, Behavior Analysis. It's actually the foundational psychologist, a scientist who was actually changing the perspective of how the people behave, and really turned so many other professionals later on in the professional development area on the people's behavior.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and we have questions from our audience coming in. Alexei is asking, please give your opinion on the future of agile contracts.
I can start. I think they've got a bright future. So, call it like it is. There's going to be agile efforts underway, agile and lean and hybrid and blah, 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 efforts for many, many years to come. And contracts will be involved with some of those. Sanjiv was getting at this earlier. I think there needs to be a movement around improving the procurement processes and the way that we go about contracting. Certainly the lean agile procurement folks have done phenomenal work in that space. So yeah, I think better ways of contracting are in our future. They're here now. The future is here, and I think things are going to get. I think they're going to become more and more popular. The traditional contracts are pretty much a mess, particularly for anything even remotely interesting. Traditional contracting methods don't get the job done and haven't for a long, long time. I think we really need to wake up and observe that.
All right. I just realized that perhaps we can have a few of our panelists answer questions, and then we can move on to other questions. So basically, I would ask, would anyone like to add anything, or can we move on? Sanjiv, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to echo what Scott has said. Scott, I think the term is the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. It's not everywhere, right? So some years ago, in the United States, there was this rollout of the healthcare system. It is called Obamacare. This is under President Obama's thing, and it was a fiasco. It was a massive failure. It's a study in organizational failure. And on the plus side, two organizations came out of it, government organizations that came out of that particular debacle. What happened is that they ended up spending about $500 billion, and there were 55 organizations the money went to. It was a mass primarily of agile or non-agile contracting, government bureaucratic contracting. Because what they did was they funded one company to do the requirements, another company to do the analysis, another group of companies, a third group of companies to do the development, and nobody was talking to each other, and the system came down, right? It completely failed. So out of that, there were two government agencies that were formed. One of them was called the USDS, United States Department Digital Services, USDS Digital Services, and the other one that's called 18F. The 18F was more on the technological solutions. USDS is interesting because they actually have a USDS digital playbook. You can Google this, you can get it. And in that USDS digital playbook, you're going to find agile contracting, believe it or not. Within the federal government, they have examples of how they recommend rolling out agile contracts. And it's interesting to see that within the federal government, many of them are ahead of the private sector, where we still lock people into long-term contracts that prevent agility. So Scott's absolutely right. The future is already here. There are people doing it, including in the federal government. Mike, I think, will probably have a more international. Well, many of you are represent different countries across the world. I'm sure every country has some version of agility in contracting.
Yeah, I was going to point out that back in about 2000, DSDM published publicly an agile contract in the public domain for people to use. And it was based, instead of statements of work, it was based on business satisfaction or fit for business purpose. And it was a model to say, hey, here's when we know it's ready to move on, or here's how we accept something, because we won't always have a fully detailed statement of work to go check letter compliance against. And so it's been around for a long time now. It's based on UK legislation, not sort of US or other European law. But yeah, there are some great sample contracts out there to help agile endeavors. And as they become more popular, I think we'll just see more and more of them. Yeah.
Okay. We have a question about the P3 Express. What is its relationship with Agile, and does the panel consider it to be Agile?
Maybe I can go for that. So, there are certain types of projects where being agile is the best solution for them, probably, but that's not always the case. There are many types of projects that have different types of requirements. And that's, for example, why in the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide, as Mike is right here, we were very careful about creating something that is compatible with both predictive projects and adaptive projects. Both of them are valid ways of work. We need them for different types of products. And that's the same type of concern that was there for P3 Express. It's designed to be compatible with both of them. And most of the concerns when it comes to product development, the way you work, either you're having a plan-driven approach or one that is based on adaptation, that's mainly in your second management layer, in the technical management layer. However, your project management layer should be compatible with it, which is hopefully the case with P3 Express.
Thank you. Okay. Based on your experience, what is the best way for a project manager to be a successful mediator among different teams included in the project? For example, how to navigate certain priorities at the same time while marching toward achieving already set deliverables. We may need to engage with Ita to clarify if needed. So I may extend her option to talk with us.
I can jump in a little bit on that. This is the norm. This is like every project I've ever been on, or every initiative that I've ever been on. So this is a fundamental, negotiating priorities and working with others and not giving everybody what they want because they'll never get it is the norm, right? That's arguably the job. So these are important skills to have, and there's many techniques to do so. Starting out with an agreed to vision. So I'll point you back to Discipline Agile. One of the few milestones that we suggest is a common vision at the beginning of an initiative, because if everybody has a different vision of what you're trying to achieve, you're in serious trouble. Now that vision can evolve, and you can argue back and forth about it, but you need to come together on what you're trying to achieve, and then work towards that, and then move forward. But yeah, that's a fundamental PM skill, is to do all this sort of stuff.
If I may add to what Scott is actually putting us forward, it's actually, as he said, a norm, but sometimes when talking with the novice project managers or the ones who are taking their stand in the organization as the project managers, you may find themselves trapped in a simple tracks that they are being not exposed to these norms because the organization is actually not being set it up as a projectized organization. So I see two important practices that may help to it. One is to reconsider the team leadership as the position based on your WBS structure or feature breakdown structure or whatever structure you have within your team. So if you're talking about different teams and you're talking about the different scope parts of your project, try to take care of the team leaders and the profiles on the professionals who are actually running these teams. Because if you're not, you're losing your first row, you're losing your first front on the project to be able to deliver more. Because if you're trying to wear all these hats, that's not going to work. So that's norm number one. And the norm number two is take care on the functional management and the matrix organizations, which are still being filled with the small kings and crown princes and, you know, rest of the very important bureaucracy or aristocracy within the organization. So very simple starting point for them is know your two answers to the two main questions. What do we need to do based on strategy, and when we need to do it? As Sanjiv said, that we need to be early. I think that's a very simple statement for all project managers to be as close as possible to the functional or resource managers, and ask tough questions to the resource managers. Who is going to be the best man for that job, and how they are going to support the project, the strategic initiative, the idea that we are delivering on time. So making these two roles of functional management and project managers collide and work together actually is called planning. This is a norm. And sometimes we forgot about it because we are talking about the 7th edition, and some of us haven't been exposed to all these editions 30 years ago, etc., etc. Hope this helps.
Yeah, let me add something here too. I think as a predictive project manager who grew up under that mode, when Agile started to raise its head, I was obviously very against it. I thought it was foolish and didn't make a lot of sense. And then I started to think about the fact that in my training days, I used to always ask my audiences, what's the biggest problem we face in being effective in our project management? And the answer invariably came down to requirements definition. There was inadequate requirements definition for the long-term value of the project. So I started to look at Agile and said, no, we're going to look at smaller pieces of that. We're going to break that down to where we get people involved, the right people involved, to where we have that kind of a clarity of what those requirements are in the short term. And we included this in the early days of the PMBOK, and some of you don't remember probably, but it said we're going to do rolling wave planning. Well, that's exactly what we're getting with Agile. So how people can be speculating that Agile's not, it's ridiculous. It's one of the best things that we've come up with for a long time. Will it work on every project? No, I agree with Nadar on that. I don't think it will. But the fact of the matter is it covered some of the major things in terms of definition and in terms of who's going to be involved in determining what that definition is. So I've gone from a sort of, well, let's wait and see, to much to the chagrin of Scott Ambler, a big supporter.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in. Rolling wave planning was in the PMBOK guide. I think in the mid '90s. Lee would know far better than I would, but I've won more than a few drinks betting people that rolling wave planning was a big part of the PMBOK for many years. So you need to be flexible. Must be flexible.
Rolling wave planning, plan, do, check, act. Many of these fundamental things that are in Agile have been in the PMBOK guide for decades, not just years.
Yeah.
I also see here there are some extra explanation here for the question. And to me, it seems like there's too much division in the project for different teams. And maybe the main problem is somewhere else. I think it was in the DSTM, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, the concept of having a one-team culture. The concept was about having a one-team culture between the people who are doing the project and the customer and so on. But definitely that applies to the whole development teams. So in some cases, you may have multiple teams, but they still should not compete with each other. So if there is some form of competition and favoring one to another and so on, maybe you should look for the problem somewhere deeper and try to solve it there.
All right. Yeah, I was going to suggest for just a classic kind of one versus another, we have some tools like
using the financial impact of A versus B, right? We can use economic decision making. So should we work on project A or project B? Should we implement a new feature, or should we try and reduce a threat? We can look at the likely economic outcome of one action over another and try and weight them that way. So we could look at the cost of delay. We can look at the expected monetary value of a threat if it occurs. We can look at the ROI on a feature and decide where is the next best dollar spent, or where is the next best euro spent, as a way of trying to dispassionately come to some consensus on what to do next, right? So as project managers, we got some great tools at our disposal, but I think, yeah, if there's kind of conflict in terms of favoritism or whatever, we need to align behind a common vision or understand what we're trying to do here first.
Great. Let me just summarize the question again in my own words, because maybe we've gone off track a little bit. So the question was, how does a project manager drive the project quickly and get people to do work? And so we do the impossible. Okay. So I'm going to jump on what Scott said. First of all, we got to start with a vision. And many organizations, the project manager has got lots of responsibility without any authority. And when that happens, the project manager cannot do anything. They're a facilitator. Actually, I don't even like the name project manager. I much prefer the word project facilitator. And their goal is just to try to get all resources, or to facilitate all resources as best as possible. There is no way a project manager can deliver deliverables through the eye of a needle. It's impossible. They're not heroes, We're just trying to do the normal job that we can and make sure we have good communication and getting everyone to work together. And escalate to the sponsor as soon as you have a major issue, and keep the vision of the project, guiding the project, and do as good as you can and deliver in cycles if you can. So project facilitation for me is the key.
I want to just piggyback on what Frank has just said. There's another question from an anonymous attendee that says, what's the most important soft skill a PM should possess nowadays? And I really believe it's not just nowadays, but for all time, facilitation and getting skills in facilitation from professional facilitation groups. There's a International Institute of Facilitation. They have training methods. We certainly cover them in project management, but I would advise to go get trained as a professional facilitator. Is going to help you everywhere, not just in project management, but in life.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, the question was, what is the most important soft skill? I would have trouble just adding one. So maybe there's 7 of us here, so maybe we can identify them. Basically, what would you consider important?
In my view, empathy is the most important.
I was going to say that. I feel cheated.
Great minds.
Definitely empathy. Just flexibility. I'll go with flexibility now.
Yeah, they all come from emotional intelligence. Hey, I'd go with maybe self-awareness if after empathy and the other ones have gone.
I would say that based on facilitation, one of the most important things you have to do in facilitation is just listen, because you don't learn much when you're talking. You just listen. Basically it. And it links a lot with empathy, of course, as well.
And if I have to pick only one, if I really, really have to, I would go also for facilitation.
Right. Thank you. Another question is, how important is the onboarding process when a junior project manager joins a company? I personally think it is good to have an onboarding process. And can you maybe share your experience with a mentor who influenced you?
Okay, I'll start, I guess. I think the onboarding process is incredibly important. You've just made a huge investment finding this person, interviewing, whatever your process is. I darn well want to make sure it's successful. I want to, we've identified this great person. I want to bring them in and help them understand the organization and get up to speed and to meet the right people. So yeah, having somebody take you under their wing and guide you through and make the introductions and point you in the right direction to, get set up and get going, I think that's absolutely critical. I think a lot of organizations struggle with that, particularly when you're dealing with volumes of new hires. But you got to do it. I want to bring people into my team and, help them succeed.
Yeah, I just heard a panel presentation today with the Eastern Tennessee PDD, and the guy basically talked about in great detail the onboarding process of Chick-fil-A, and it's unbelievable. The retention rate is 87 to 89%, and it's a long-term process that they go through to make sure that those new employees have everything they need and feel comfortable in the new job. I don't know why we can't do that for project management people as well.
Yeah. Do it for everybody. Everybody. It's an investment. You're bringing a person into your organization. That's a heck of an investment. Why would you put it at risk? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I've worked at a lot of organizations as contractors, and even not in a permanent role. My most memorable onboarding was when I would just walk through the various business units and taken like start to end through the value stream of the organization. It just gave me such a great awareness of why we were doing something. And so, yeah, if you can get mentored by somebody who's open and accessible and explains everything. I was way more invested in that organization, even after a week or two, than I was for many others after a much longer period, because they took the time to explain why they existed and how things work. It was great.
Maybe I can add, there are two possible scenarios out there that I've explored and worked so far. The arrival of the new project manager can always be seen by the team, both as an opportunity and a threat. So depending on that situation, you may find different ways to accelerate the onboarding. But the new project managers definitely should bring some new ideas, some new ways of thinking, some new ways of doing things, and that will inevitably make some changes in the first front. And also that can make people feel a little bit uneasy, because these are the change makers. These are the people who actually are trying to have their credibility based on the experience, based on the ways they work with other people. And also being upfront a little bit or external to the organization sometimes can help. But that means that we need to take a importance or special focus on the culture of the organization, where actually every project manager can have and has their own style of management, styles of working with the people, working with the artifacts, working with the teams. So helping project manager to settle and pull in some of the direction of that project actually is essential, because if they don't understand the culture of the project and they don't understand the culture of the team, it easily turns out to be the downside of the project management. So that cultural grounding, I think, is a very important part of the onboarding process. And it can come from different sources. You can develop a comprehensive understanding with someone in the team, but also not have a clear understanding of the why we are doing this. And on the other hand, the roles that people perform need to be cleared out, need to be understood very well. So organization actually should do better. They should do more on arranging the handovers, initiating the people who are the project managers on that job to connect with each and every stakeholder, which potentially can bring in the requirements, the risks, the experience, because sometimes we are taking the shoes of the previous project managers, which is again completely another scenario. But definitely setting that formal process of onboarding for project managers, it could be a very could be of very high impact to the speed and the effectiveness of the project itself.
Just a short comment from me. One of the other points I got from our notes I took down when Scott was talking, he mentioned that every organization, one of their goals is to become a learning organization. And it's much easier to onboard people into a learning organization than it is to a non-learning one. So actually, if you are trying to hire project managers and create an onboard procedure for an organization that doesn't have that culture, you're wasting your time because they're not going to stay long anyway, they will leave. So first, make your bed and make it a good learning organization, then it's much easier.
Thank you. Next question is a two-parter. Usually in larger organizations, hierarchy already exists, but what is the best advice you can give to startup organizations where one employee can have multiple roles at the initial phases of development of the organization itself and application too? So, yeah, kind of like single employee carrying, many hats.
I will go for this actually. I'd attempt it. Maybe I'm wrong, but please don't correct me if I'm wrong. You know, just nod your head and pretend that the answer was correct. Yeah. So we have tried to give a couple of courses, or number of free courses, to local startup companies. And what we find is the following. These people are driven people. They believe that they know the best. And they don't want to listen to anybody else until they get into big problems down the road. So trying to offer project management expertise or advice to startups is not a good investment of your time, or even not a good investment of their time, because that's what they believe. Okay, good. You can correct me. It's okay. My ego is big enough.
Oh, that was all. I thought you were going to give a solution.
No, I have no
Just describe the problem.
Yeah, I can offer some thoughts, Frank, and don't disagree. It's definitely the case. If you look at a startup organization, they have unrealistic deadlines, usually whole promise of reward versus risk, right? You're going to get all this big money if you take this risk. And so most of the time people in startups are working extraordinary hours. They don't have a lot of time. They're stressed. And when we're in that fight or flight mode, they're not thinking, right? And what they lack most is a sense of discipline. And it's not that they're choosing that. They're in a place they're not thinking, and therefore they're not understanding that the way to surmount their problems, the chaos and all the issues that you find with startups, is to implement some sort of minimal discipline. In large organizations, we have the other problem, right? We have too much structure, we have too much rigor, and it stifles innovation. With startups, it's the opposite problem. They have no discipline and they have no structure, and which results in the chaos. So I think one of the things is to make a judgment, as Frank says, well, maybe they're not going to pay attention. And so you just walk away, or if they're amenable to it, if they say, we're open to putting in some minimal structure, minimal planning, minimal execution, minimal oversight, that's the way to get them out of it. But they have to be willing to give up on their notion that they can get there through just chaos. They have to be willing to put in some minimal discipline.
And there's a great book called Rocket Fuel about startups growing, Gino Wickman, and it's basically, how does a visionary give up doing everything and then start offloading some of that work? And they talk about an integrator and a visionary. So from very small, from like one to scaling, yeah, that Rocket Fuel has got some great good startup advice too.
I think one way is to, and it's not limited to startups. Sometimes we really have to do more than one thing, one role. And it causes problems when those roles have different types of things to do. One may be abstract, the other may be concrete. And the problem is that we forget about one of those or underestimate it. And the typical solution is to just change hats. At each point in time, you have to be only one of those roles, not both. And remember to give enough time to both of them. I think that's the only thing. And for startups, it's a necessity. They really have to do it. So you say, I'm going to spend 20% of my time as a manager, as a visionary, and then 60% of time on developing as an engineer, and 20% on something else.
Okay.
What I've experienced over the years working with entrepreneurial organizations is that the leaders of those organizations have a very strong attitude about not giving up the entrepreneurial spirit. And there's a time in business where you transition from entrepreneur to business. And many of these folks are not able to make that transition. And therefore, you see a lot of these startups fail because they won't let go and realize that there's time to become managed as opposed to innovative.
Okay. I take these silences as a segue to our next question.
Maybe, Dragan, I can just step in with one reference more. I think that we are all being exposed to the Agile practice guide so far. I think we sometimes can advise people in the startups to just try taking these two roles separated, to try to play it with two hats, like who is the product owner, who is the Scrum Master, because sometimes it's so simple, like a mother and a father. So it's so easy to understand, but people are trying to be the, the person who has it all, who, he or she finds every solution for every issue, etc. For those who are learners who want to really listen for your advice, or someone who can really adapt the more sophisticated approaches, you may reference the Edward de Bono 6 hats approach, because it really gives people opportunity to think about differently. And if 6 hats are too much, just try with product ownership and the Scrum Master thing, like mother and a father of the child, which is actually focusing on the two different perspectives which are needed for us to produce anything valuable. We need to have these two productive perspectives, which are essentially different, but they're looking forward to the joint value they need to produce. Just an idea.
Yep. Yeah, I'm jumping from QA section to Googling the books that you mentioned and posting them to chat. So I'm a bit all over the place. I like this next question. Thank you, Susanna. In the software development world, is it better to have people in management with more technical knowledge or more management experience?
I'll jump in on that one. I want to have all managers having some technical expertise. I believe that all organizations are software organizations at heart. And if you don't understand that, if you don't recognize that, if you don't understand the implications of technology, please get out of the way. Get out of the way. You are not doing good things for your organization, and it's hard. We are in a quickly changing world, and it's because of technology. And too many organizations are really in trouble because they don't understand the implications of that. And I'll point back to the data stuff, which is near and dear to my heart. Many people like to talk about making data-driven decisions and data-influenced decisions. That's the big thing in product management these days. It's the big thing in management in general. And yet they don't coherently talk about data. Where's that data coming from? What about the quality of the data? It's garbage in, garbage out. And most organizations have very severe technical challenges when it comes to delivering quality data on time. And it's because of the really bad management decisions that have been made in the past. And are your organizations fixing those problems? Probably not. Do you have a coherent strategy? So, and it's because of a lack of technical expertise and knowledge in the management sphere. So I think it's very important.
I have a different opinion about this, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think maybe we can have 3 groups of people. There's one group who believe that the manager or project manager should be the best technical expert, very old-fashioned maybe. There's another view that the project manager doesn't have to be technical, but it may be better if they are, which is something that actually PMI has been trying to put forward for many years. And there is a third opinion that it's better if the project manager is not technical. And actually, Scott, that's for the same reason you just said, because we don't want them to get in the way. If you know something, if you're a technical person, you become involved in that thing. It's very difficult. It is possible, but very difficult. I know I cannot do that so easily. If I see something technical that people are doing and it's not perfect, I have to get myself involved. But a perfect manager is the person who's only facilitating without getting themselves involved in those things. So it may be better if they are not technical. And for the decisions, a good project manager is the one who understands how to use technical people. They don't have to have all that information to make the decisions. They bring people, they do brainstorming and everything and go on. So if I really have to pick one of those three groups, I think I would go for the third group.
Yeah, I would fundamentally disagree with that. I have never seen a manager like that didn't make very bad decisions in the long run. They get, if you don't understand what you're managing, you'll get taken for a ride by stronger personalities and by people like that. It's, yes, maybe you can facilitate, but in the long, and it's not just about project managers, by the way, this is management in general. You need to understand what you're managing. So if you're managing a technical thing, you got to have at least some background in what you're managing. So that way you can make coherent decisions. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, weekly technical people jumping in and doing technical thing or doing something might not be the greatest thing. So you've got to have a little bit of discipline and not jump in when you shouldn't be jumping in. And that's not easy. That is not easy. And I would hope the staff would push back on you. But yeah, I've never seen that work.
Wow.
Sorry, never seen that.
I've never
work.
seen this aggressive side of you, Scott.
I know. Yeah, it's Friday.
Well, here's mine, because I want to disagree with you, obviously. My view has always been the manager doesn't have to know all the answers. He or she just needs to know where to get them. And I think that's what Nadar was kind of alluding to. And I've always felt that way. And I've managed a wide variety of projects. In fact, most people would say I didn't know anything about any of them. But the fact of the matter is, I think as long as you understand what your limitations are and know what questions you need to be asking, you can do okay.
Yeah, but it's not just the projects though. It's like this is what's the long-term implications of some of the decisions that are getting made on those teams. And this is if you look at technical debt, for example, which all organizations are suffering from, the biggest cause of that are project management decisions. And I'm not blaming the project managers for that. I'm just saying, but it is coming out of project related decisions. And I think the trade-offs, the short-termism that we see in some projects leads to eroding the long-term capabilities of these organizations. And this is a serious problem. And so I think certainly given how challenging technical debt is in many organizations these days and a limiting factor in organizations' ability to compete, I would invite all management, not just project management, but all management, all people, to be very aware of technical debt and the causes. And as a result, you got to have some technical background there. You're never going to appreciate technical debt unless you understand technical. So I think we need to up our game.
All right,
I'll just let the organizational environment speak for itself.
Lee, you were going to say something. I was just going to jump in on
I
that.
just was going to tell Scott I surrender.
Okay. You're right. I'm not usually this aggressive, but anyway. But here's the problem. It's just, this is such a huge problem that's been ignored for so long. And we just have to lay this at the feet of management. It really is a very serious management challenge. There's a few techie challenges there as well, but it's like an 80 to 90% management problem. It's one of those things so blatant.
And I would say that it's not just technology, right? I think for any leader, whether we're a project manager or in management, we need a holistic view of our environment and what we're working with. So as a leader, you don't necessarily have to be in the weeds or the trenches with technology, but you need to understand technology. Likewise, even though we're talking about technology, it's the business as well. As a project manager, it serves us really well to understand the business that we don't have to be a subject matter expert or an expert in the business, but we're not going to have a holistic view unless we have both an understanding of what technology can do and some of the decisions that have been made that have caused problems, as Scott pointed out with technical debt, but also on the business side. If we don't understand our customers and if we don't understand the business that we're in, then we're not going to be effective leaders and effective project managers. I just wanted to do a call out for the example that Lee talked about earlier. He mentioned Chick-fil-A and their onboarding process. Well, they have a great customer focused process as well. They have a great lean process as well. So it's a great model. It's a good company to look at in terms of what they do, both in terms of their use of technology, in the use of facilitation, and their understanding of the customer.
All right. And I think we are near our time box here. So I would like to thank everyone who participated in this panel, and also thank all the attendees who have given us their time, given that this is a Friday as well as fairly late for some of our people here. And like Katarina said at the start, this is the first HTech project management conference. So we are looking for new ways to expand this and perhaps even have a live one in person next year. So stay tuned, everyone, and we are looking to always learn more and explore more. And these panelists and participants have been a tremendous help to us, and I would like to thank them all again for having taken part in this. And I would say thank you, everyone, and see you next year.
Great.
Thanks, Dragon.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good weekend, actually.
Yeah. Happy Friday to all who celebrate. We say, yeah.
For people who celebrate Fridays, happy Friday.
Yeah, exactly.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
God.
Bye, everyone.